An elderly dog was about to be put down. But in his final moment, he did something no one in that shelter will ever forget. A tired worker thought it would be just another sad goodbye, until the old dog refused to walk to the table and started acting like he knew something everyone else didn't. What began as one quiet night became a battle against orders, lies, and a truth buried deep in the system. The dog's eyes told a story of loyalty, of loss, and of one final mission no one saw coming. When the clock struck midnight, the worker had to make a choice: follow the rules or follow the dog. Because what if this final moment wasn't the end, but the beginning of something that would expose everything? What secret was this dying dog protecting, and why did it bring an entire shelter to its knees? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Rain drummed against the metal roof of Cedar Ridge County Shelter, its rhythm matching Wren Halstead's tired footsteps as she made her final rounds. The clock on the wall showed 11:15 at night, and the storm outside showed no signs of letting up. Lightning flashed through the high windows, casting strange shadows across the concrete floor. Wren's shoulders ached from hauling bags of food and cleaning kennels all day. The shelter was packed beyond capacity. Again. Every cage held at least 2 animals, and the constant barking echoed off the walls. But as she walked past the last row of kennels, an unusual silence caught her attention. Buck's kennel was always quiet. The big mixed-breed dog watched her with those intelligent amber eyes that seemed to hold decades of wisdom. His graying muzzle and slower movements showed his age, but there was something special about him that had drawn Wren in from day one. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, approaching his gate. That's when she saw it, a red tag clipped to his paperwork. Her heart skipped a beat. Red tags meant only one thing at Cedar Ridge. With trembling fingers, she unclipped the file and held it under the dim fluorescent light. The words blurred before her eyes. Scheduled for euthanasia, Saturday dawn, aggressive behavior bite incident. No, Wren breathed, gripping the clipboard so hard her knuckles turned white. This has to be a mistake. She'd spent countless hours with Buck over the past few weeks. He was gentle, patient, almost regal in his calm demeanor. The thought of him being aggressive seemed impossible. Flipping through the paperwork, she searched for details of the alleged incident, but found only a hastily scrawled note without any witness statements or proper documentation. Lightning cracked again, closer this time, and the lights flickered. In that moment of semi-darkness, Wren made a decision. She couldn't let this happen, not without at least saying goodbye properly. Her hands shook as she worked the latch on Buck's kennel. "Come here, old friend," she whispered. "Let me just sit with you for a bit." But Buck didn't move toward her as he usually did. Instead, he rose slowly to his feet, his cloudy eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her pause. There was something different about his expression, something almost human in its urgency. As Wren stepped forward, Buck backed away. He moved to the kennel door, but instead of coming out, he pawed at the ground near the exit. His eyes darted between Wren and the shelter's main door, then back again. "What is it, boy?" Wren asked, her voice barely audible over the storm. Buck whined softly, not a sound of fear or pain, but something more deliberate. He pawed at the ground again, then took 2 steps toward the exit before looking back at her. The message in his behavior was clear. He wanted to leave. "You understand, don't you?" Wren whispered, her throat tight with emotion. "You know what that red tag means." Another flash of lightning illuminated the kennel, and in that brief, bright moment, Wren saw something in Buck's eyes that shook her to her core. It wasn't just intelligence. It was awareness. This wasn't simply an old dog's instinct. Buck knew exactly what was happening, and he was asking, no, pleading, for her help. Wren's mind raced through her years working at the shelter. She'd seen hundreds of animals face euthanasia, and while it always hurt, she'd told herself it was part of the job. But this was different. Everything about Buck was different. She thought about his file, how he'd come in as a stray, but his bearing and training suggested a prestigious background. The way he responded to commands, how he watched and analyzed situations, his careful interactions with other dogs, none of it matched the aggressive stray label he'd been given. Buck whined again, more insistent this way. He took another step toward the exit, then looked back at her with those knowing eyes. The storm growled overhead, as if nature itself was urging Wren to make a choice. Her hands were cold and clammy as she gripped the kennel door. "I can't just," she started to say, but Buck's steady gaze stopped her. In all her years working with animals, she'd never felt such a clear connection, such an undeniable understanding passing between human and dog. The old dog's body was tense, not with fear, but with purpose. Every line of his frame spoke of urgency, of desperate need. He wasn't begging for treats or attention. He was asking for his life. Wren's mind flashed to all the times she'd watched Buck in his kennel, how he'd comfort the nervous dogs in neighboring cages, how he'd been so gentle with the shelter's cats during supervised interactions, how he'd sat patiently with scared children who visited the shelter, somehow knowing exactly how to put them at ease. The storm crashed overhead, making the building's old walls shudder. In that moment, Wren saw the red tag flutter on its clip, like a scarlet reminder of what morning would bring. Dawn was less than 7 hours away. 7 hours until they would lead Buck down that final hallway, into that room from which no animal returned. Buck stepped closer to her, his movement deliberate and graceful despite his age. He pressed his nose gently against her hand, not in affection, but in question. In all her years working with animals, Wren had never felt such a clear connection, such an undeniable understanding passing between human and dog. She looked at his face, the graying muzzle, the clouded eyes that still held such wisdom, the ears that perked forward with intelligent attention. This wasn't just another shelter dog. There was something special about Buck, something she couldn't quite explain, but couldn't deny either. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like nature's own countdown clock. Buck's eyes never left her face. His stance remained alert, ready, waiting for her decision. The way he held himself reminded her of something, or someone. There was a nobility in his bearing that seemed almost military, like the service dogs she'd seen in parades or at veterans' events. Wren's fingers traced over the red tag again, feeling its sharp edges. The pit in her stomach grew deeper as she thought about what would happen at dawn. How many times had she watched this scene play out? How many times had she told herself it was just part of the job, necessary and inevitable? But nothing about this felt necessary or inevitable. The longer she stood there, the more wrong it felt. The incomplete paperwork, the vague allegations of aggression, the rush to euthanize without proper investigation. None of it added up. Buck shifted his weight, his paw scraping against the concrete floor once more. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet kennel room, punctuated only by distant thunder and the occasional whimper from other dogs. His message remained clear. He needed to leave, and he needed her help to do it. Wren's heart pounded in her chest as she realized she was actually considering it. Breaking protocol, risking her job, maybe even breaking the law. Everything she'd worked for could be destroyed by one impulsive decision in the middle of a stormy night. But as another flash of lightning illuminated Buck's face, she saw something that made her decision crystal clear. A single tear had formed in the corner of his eye, rolling down his graying fur. It was such a human gesture, such a profound display of emotion, that it broke through every barrier of professional distance she'd built up over the years. This wasn't just about saving a dog. This was about standing up against something that felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. Buck's eyes held wisdom, courage, and a desperate plea for justice. How could she face herself in the mirror if she walked away now? The storm raged outside, as if reflecting the turmoil in Wren's heart. She looked at the clock again. 11:30 now. Time was running out. Whatever she was going to do, she needed to decide quickly. Buck stood at attention, watching her with those knowing eyes, waiting for her to make a choice that would change both their lives forever. The red tag seemed to glow in the dim light, a symbol of everything that was wrong with a system that could condemn such a special soul without proper cause or consideration. In that moment, standing in the quiet kennel with rain hammering overhead and Buck's steady gaze fixed upon her, Wren felt the weight of the most important decision of her career pressing down on her shoulders. Everything she'd been taught about procedures and protocols seemed to fade away in the face of this one undeniable truth. What was happening to Buck was wrong, and she might be his only chance for survival. The microchip scanner felt heavy in Wren's trembling hands. She'd checked hundreds of animals before, but something about Buck's earlier behavior nagged at her. His eyes held too much understanding, his movements too purposeful. Working at the shelter had taught her to trust her instincts about animals, and everything about Buck screamed that he was more than just another stray. The dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead as she ran the scanner over Buck's shoulder blades. The device beeped, and Wren's eyes widened at the string of numbers that appeared on the small screen. Most shelter dogs had simple identification chips, but this was different. A long sequence that started with FEMA. Buck sat perfectly still, his clouded amber eyes watching her with that same unnerving intelligence. Thunder rolled outside as Wren's fingers flew across the shelter computer's keyboard, inputting the code into their database. The search took longer than usual, reaching beyond their local system into deeper archives. When the file finally appeared, Wren had to grip the edge of the desk to steady herself. The photo showed a younger Buck, proud and powerful, wearing a search and rescue vest. Her eyes skimmed the text, heart pounding harder with each line. K9 unit, Buck status, retired, medical service, FEMA search and rescue. Handler, Captain James Halstead unit, Cedar Ridge Fire Department. The room seemed to spin. James Halstead, her father. The man she hadn't spoken to in 5 years, not since that horrible fight after her mother's funeral. The same father who had thrown himself into his work, who had chosen his duty over his grieving daughter. Buck whined softly, pressing his nose against her hand. The gesture was so gentle, so knowing, that tears sprang to her eyes. How many lives had these paws helped save? How many disasters had this noble creature faced alongside her father? "Why didn't he tell me about you?" she whispered, running her fingers through Buck's graying fur. The dog's tail wagged slowly, and she could have sworn she saw recognition in those wise eyes. Had he known who she was all along? The record showed Buck had been retired after an injury 3 years, ago. There was a gap in his history after that, bureaucratic notes about transfers and reassignments, until he'd somehow ended up here, mislabeled as aggressive and scheduled for euthanasia. Wren grabbed the file and hurried through the shelter's dark corridors, Buck padding faithfully beside her. The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows like nature itself was trying to warn her. She found Director Petra Klein in her office, perfectly put together despite the late hour. "Director Klein," Wren said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to show you something about Buck's case." Petra barely glanced up from her computer. "The red-tagged Shepherd mix? That case is closed, Wren. But there's been a mistake." Wren spread the papers across Petra's desk. "He's a retired FEMA dog. Look at his service record. Dozens of successful rescues, commendations for bravery. There's no way he could be aggressive." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Petra's face as she finally looked up. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Concern? Before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Protocol is protocol, Wren. The bite report has been filed. The decision is final." "But the report doesn't make sense," Wren pressed. "Buck was a highly trained rescue dog. He worked with the fire department. He saved lives. There has to be some mistake." "Are you questioning my judgment?" Petra's voice took on a dangerous edge. "Or perhaps the judgment of our entire review board." Buck stood silently beside Wren, his presence somehow making her braver. "I'm questioning why a decorated service animal was marked for euthanasia without proper investigation. His handler should have been notified." "Enough!" Petra stood abruptly, her chair rolling back against the wall. "This is exactly the kind of emotional attachment we can't afford in this job, Wren. Animals come and go. Some decisions are difficult, but they're necessary. But leave it alone." Petra's tone dropped to something almost threatening. "This discussion is over. Buck will be euthanized at dawn, as scheduled. Don't make me write you up for insubordination." Wren felt cold spreading through her chest. There was something wrong here, something beyond normal bureaucratic stubbornness. The way Petra's hands had tightened on the desk, the flash of recognition in her eyes when she'd seen Buck's file, it all pointed to something deeper, something hidden. "Yes, Director Klein," Wren said quietly, gathering the papers. But as she turned to leave, Buck still faithfully at her side, she knew she couldn't just walk away. This wasn't just about saving one dog anymore. This was about uncovering the truth, about justice for a loyal servant who'd given everything to help others. Petra's voice followed her to the door. "Remember what I said, Wren? Some things are better left alone." The warning hung in the air like smoke, but Wren's mind was already racing. Why would anyone want to hide Buck's true identity? What could be so important about one elderly dog that it would make Petra Klein nervous? Buck pressed against her leg as they walked back through the dark corridor, his warmth a reminder of everything at stake. Dawn was approaching, and with it, a decision that would change both their lives forever. Wren looked down at his trusting face and made a silent promise. She wouldn't let him down. Not when he'd spent his whole life saving others. The rain continued to pour outside, matching the turmoil in Wren's heart. Time was running out, and she had to decide: follow the rules and let an innocent die, or risk everything to uncover the truth. Buck's eyes met hers again, filled with that same urgent intelligence that had first caught her attention. In them, she saw not just a plea for help, but a challenge to stand up for what was right. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Wren hurried through the shelter's maze-like corridors, her footsteps echoing against the worn linoleum. Buck matched her stride for stride, his nails clicking softly on the floor. The old dog's presence gave her strength, but time was running out. She needed allies, and she knew exactly where to start. She found Dr. Lionel Baines in the clinic, hunched over paperwork at his desk. The shelter veterinarian looked up as she entered, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. The familiar scent of antiseptic and coffee filled the small office. "Dr. Baines, I need your help," Wren said, closing the door behind her. "It's about Buck." The veteran vet's eyes softened as they fell on the elderly dog. "Ah yes, the red-tagged case. Nasty business, that." There's more to it. Wren spread Buck's newly discovered records across his desk, covering his half-finished forms. Look at this. He's a former FEMA search and rescue dog. Highly trained, decorated service record. Something's not right about this euthanasia order. Dr. Baines adjusted his glasses, leaning forward to study the papers. His coffee-stained breath caught as he read. Good Lord, this is quite something. He looked at Buck with new eyes. No wonder he's so well behaved. But why wasn't this flagged earlier? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Wren said. Will you help me file a hold request? We need time to verify his credentials and contact his former handler. The vet's face clouded. He glanced at the door, then back at the papers. Petra won't like this. She's particular about her decisions being questioned. Please, Dr. Baines. You know this isn't right. Before he could answer, a knock at the door made them both jump. Silas Merrick, the animal control officer, stuck his head in. His uniform was wrinkled from a long shift, but his eyes were alert. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I couldn't help overhearing. Mind if I take a look at those papers? Wren had always liked Silas. Unlike some of the other officers, he treated the animals with genuine care. She handed him the file, watching as his weathered face grew serious. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. A FEMA dog? This changes everything. Will you both help me? Wren asked. We need to file the hold request before dawn. Dr. Baines removed his glasses, cleaning them nervously with his lab coat. The proper procedure would be to submit a formal review request, with supporting documentation from a licensed veterinarian. He paused, then straightened his shoulders. Which I am prepared to provide. I'll back it up, Silas added. As the responding ACO, I can testify that Buck's shown no signs of aggression during his entire stay. Relief flooded through Wren. They worked quickly, Dr. Baines drafting the medical portion while Silas added his field observations. Buck watched them all with those knowing eyes, as if he understood they were fighting for his life. The hold request was nearly complete when Petra Klein burst into the clinic, her heels striking the floor like hammer blows. Her face was flushed with anger. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, snatching the papers from Dr. Baines's desk. A hold request, after I explicitly told you to drop it? Director Klein, Wren started, we have new evidence. Evidence? Petra's laugh was sharp as broken glass. What we have is insubordination. Dr. Baines, I expected better from you. And Officer Merrick, this is far outside your jurisdiction. Actually, Silas said quietly, reviewing potentially incorrect euthanasia orders is exactly my jurisdiction. Petra's eyes narrowed. This is my shelter. My decision is final. She turned to Wren, voice cold as steel. As for you, you're suspended, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and clear out your locker. You can't do that, Wren protested. There are procedures. I can and I have. Security will escort you out. Petra crumpled the hold request in her fist, and Buck's euthanasia will proceed as scheduled. Dr. Baines stood up, his chair scraping back. Director, I must protest. As the attending veterinarian, would you like to join her on suspension, Doctor? Petra's tone made it clear it wasn't really a question. The vet deflated, sinking back into his chair. But Wren saw the shame in his eyes, the way his hands clenched under his desk. As security arrived to escort her out, Wren felt tears threatening. But she wouldn't give Petra the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She knelt beside Buck, wrapping her arms around his solid frame. He pressed his graying muzzle against her cheek, and she whispered, I won't give up on you. I promise. Walking through the shelter's front doors felt like betrayal. The dawn was still hours away, but Wren felt the weight of each passing minute. She was halfway to her car when she heard footsteps behind her. "Ren, wait." It was Silas, jogging to catch up. He glanced over his shoulder before speaking in a low voice. "You're right to fight this. Something stinks here. And it's not just the kennels. But what can I do now? She suspended me." "Maybe that's exactly what we needed." His eyes held a determined glint. "Sometimes you have to step outside the system to fix it. I'll keep an eye on things here. You dig deeper into Buck's background. There's more to this story, I can feel it." Thunder rumbled overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Ren looked back at the shelter, its windows glowing like tired eyes in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere inside, Buck was waiting, counting on her. She couldn't let him down. "Thank you, Silas," she said softly. He nodded, then hurried back inside before his absence could be noticed. Ren climbed into her car, her suspended badge a heavy weight in her pocket. As the rain intensified, she gripped her steering wheel, mind racing. Petra's extreme reaction, the missing records, the rush to euthanize a former service dog, none of it added up. But one thing was crystal clear. She had precious few hours to uncover the truth and save Buck's life, and she would need every ally she could get. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Silas Merrick moved through the empty shelter office. At 3 o'clock in the morning, only the night staff remained, making their routine rounds. He'd volunteered for the graveyard shift, knowing it would give him the privacy he needed. His boots squeaked against the linoleum as he made his way to the records room. The keyring at his hip jingled softly. One of the perks of being a senior animal control officer was having access to almost every door in the building. He found the right key and slipped inside. The records room smelled of old paper and dust. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers containing thousands of animal histories. Silas knew what he was looking for, the euthanasia logs from the past year. He pulled out his flashlight, not wanting to draw attention by turning on the overhead lights. "Let's see what you're hiding," he muttered, pulling open the first drawer. The files were organized by date. He started with the most recent and worked backward, making notes on his phone. After an hour of methodical searching, a pattern emerged that made his stomach turn. Every 3 months, like clockwork, there would be a spike in euthanasia orders. The reasons were always vague, showing aggressive tendencies or bite risk assessment. But what caught his eye was the timing. Each spike happened just days before major fundraising events or donor visits. Silas pulled up the shelter's public relations calendar on his phone. Sure enough, the dates matched perfectly with visits from Brody Callahan, the shelter's biggest donor. The man who owned half the county's construction companies and whose charitable foundation made headlines for saving animals. Saving them after clearing out the ones that don't make good photo ops, Silas growled under his breath. He photographed several key documents, his hands shaking with anger. These weren't just numbers on a page. These were lives. Good dogs, many of them seniors, marked for death to make room for more marketable rescues. Meanwhile, across town, Ren paced her small apartment. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Buck's face, those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand everything. Her phone lay silent on the coffee table, though she kept willing it to ring with news from Silas. The buzz of an incoming text made her jump. It wasn't from Silas, but from Maya, one of the shelter's weekend volunteers. Ren's heart started racing as she read the message. "Just heard what happened. You need to know something. Last month I overheard Callahan talking to Petra. He was pushing hard about image management and cleaning house. Said the foundation needed more inspiring stories for their annual report." Petra looked scared, Ren, like he owned her. Ren sank onto her couch, pieces clicking into place. Brody Callahan's foundation had been the shelter's lifeline for years. His donations kept the lights on, paid for renovations, funded the medical wing. But those donations came with strings that were choking the life out of the very animals they were supposed to help. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Silas. "Found something. Can't talk over phone. Meet me at Denny's on 4th Street in 20 minutes. The 24-hour diner was nearly empty when Wren arrived. Silas sat in a corner booth, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of him. His usually calm face was drawn with worry. "It's worse than we thought," he said as soon as she sat down. He slid his phone across the table, showing her the photos he'd taken. "Look at the pattern. Every time Callahan schedules a visit, suddenly we have a dozen or more dangerous dogs that need to be put down." Wren scrolled through the images, her heart sinking. "They're making room for more photogenic rescues. Younger dogs, puppies?" "Exactly. The kind that look good in press releases and annual reports." Silas ran a hand through his hair. "Petra's been cooking the books for years, inflating bite incidents, falsifying behavioral assessments, all to keep Callahan's money flowing." "And Buck?" Wren's voice caught. "Why him specifically?" "That's what doesn't add up. He's not the only senior dog on the list, but Petra seems especially determined in his case. There's something about him that's got her spooked." The waitress came by to refill Silas's coffee. They waited until she was out of earshot before continuing. "Maybe it's because of his background," Wren suggested. "A former search and rescue dog would make this look even worse, especially one with a clean record." Silas nodded slowly. "Could be, but I think there's more to it. The way Petra reacted when you brought up his history, it was like she was afraid of something coming to light." "Or someone finding out," Wren added. She pulled out her phone and showed Silas the text from Maya. "Callahan's been putting pressure on her. What if Buck's case isn't just about clearing kennel space? What if he knows something?" "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Search and rescue dogs are trained to find things, people, evidence. What if he saw something he wasn't supposed to? Something at the shelter?" Silas leaned back, considering. "That's a stretch, but these numbers don't lie. There's serious money involved here, the kind of money people might kill to protect." "We need proof," Wren said. "Something concrete that shows what they're doing. The falsified records, the connection to Callahan's donations." "I can keep digging at the shelter," Silas offered. "But we're running out of time. Dawn's in 4 hours, and once that euthanasia order goes through—" "It won't," Wren said firmly. "I made Buck a promise. And now we know it's not just about saving one dog, it's about exposing what's really happening at Cedar Ridge." They spent the next hour planning, speaking in low voices over cooling coffee. Outside, the night sky was starting to lighten, the first hint of dawn approaching. Time was running out, but now they had something they didn't have before. Proof that something was deeply wrong at Cedar Ridge Shelter, and the determination to expose it. Silas drummed his fingers on the diner table, his face brightening with sudden realization. "The bite report," he said. "I haven't actually seen it yet, just the euthanasia order referencing it. Give me 15 minutes. He slid out of the booth, leaving Wren with her half-empty coffee cup. Through the diner's wide windows, she could see the sky beginning to pale. Her watch showed 4:15 in the morning. Less than 2 hours until the shelter's morning shift began. 13 minutes later, Silas burst back through the diner doors, clutching a manila folder. His face was flushed from running. "You need to see this," he said, spreading the documents across the table, careful to avoid the coffee rings. The alleged bite report was printed on official county letterhead, but something was off. The form was mostly empty. No incident description, no witness statements, no medical documentation. At the bottom was a single signature. Amy Martinez. Amy Martinez? Wren leaned closer. The temp who quit back in September? Exactly. Silas tapped the signature. This report is dated 2 weeks ago. Amy's been gone for months. Wren felt her hands start to shake. Not from fear, but from anger. They didn't even try to make it convincing. They thought no one would look closely enough to catch it. There's more. Silas pulled out another document. I found the original intake assessment from when Buck first arrived. Perfect temperament scores. Notes specifically mention his calm demeanor around staff and other animals. No history of aggression whatsoever. The proof was right there in black and white. Buck had been set up. The bite report was a complete fabrication, likely rushed, through when someone realized his FEMA background might raise questions. I'm going to confront her, Wren said, gathering the papers. Silas reached across the table, catching her wrist. Wren, wait, it's the middle of the night. Maybe we should… No. She gently pulled free. Dawn's coming. Once that euthanasia order goes through, none of this will matter. We have to stop it now. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. I'm coming with you. The drive to Cedar Ridge Shelter took 12 minutes. Wren spent every second of it rehearsing what she would say, how she would handle Petra's inevitable deflections and excuses. The shelter's parking lot was empty except for one car, Petra's silver Mercedes. She practically lives here some nights, Silas explained as they pulled in, especially when there's a big donor event coming up. The building's side door opened with Silas's key card. The kennels were quiet at this hour, though a few dogs stirred as they passed. Buck's cage was at the end of the row. He stood when he saw them, tail wagging slowly, eyes bright with recognition. Stay with him, Wren told Silas. I'll handle Petra. Light spilled from under Petra's office door. Wren knocked once, firmly, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. Petra sat at her desk, surrounded by grant applications and donor reports. She looked up, startled. You're suspended, she snapped. You have no right to be here. Wren dropped the bite report on her desk. And you had no right to forge this. Petra's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Amy Martinez's signature, on a report dated 2 weeks ago. Funny, since she hasn't worked here in months. You're making accusations you can't… I can prove every word. Wren laid out the rest of the documents. Buck's clean temperament assessment, the pattern of suspicious euthanasia orders right before Callahan's visits, the kennel statistics that don't add up. How long has this been going on, Petra? How many innocent dogs have died so you could make room for better photo ops? Something shifted in Petra's expression, a crack in the polished facade. You wouldn't understand what it takes to keep this place running, she said, her voice low and bitter. Do you know what happens without Callahan's donations? We close. Every animal here dies or gets shipped to overcrowded shelters in other counties. Sometimes hard choices have to be made. Murdering innocent animals isn't a hard choice. It's a crime. Falsifying county documents is a crime. What you're doing here is wrong, and you know it. Petra stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Wrong? You want to talk about wrong? Try watching this place fall apart because bleeding hearts like you can't understand reality. Callahan wants results. He wants success stories. He wants his money to show visible impact. If that means some older dogs have to make way for more adoptable ones, that's business. Buck isn't just some older dog, Wren shot back. He's a trained search and rescue animal. He saved lives. And you're going to kill him because what? He doesn't photograph well enough for your donor reports? I'm trying to save hundreds of animals by sacrificing a few. The funding we get from Callahan's Foundation pays for everything. Medical care, food, staff salaries. Without it, you'd have to run this place honestly. Find real solutions instead of quick fixes. Actually work to save lives instead of just pretending to. Petra's laugh was sharp and cold. Honestly? You want honesty? Fine. Buck is a liability. His background raises too many questions. Questions about why a valuable search and rescue dog ended up here in the first place. Questions about how many other animals we've processed without proper documentation. He needs to go, and he will go. Now get out of my office before I call security." Wren stood her ground. "Call them. Call the police too while you're at it. I'm sure they'd be very interested in these forged documents. Get out!" Petra's voice shook with rage. "No." Wren planted her hands on the desk, leaning forward. "I'm not leaving until you rescind Buck's euthanasia order, and tomorrow I'm taking these documents to the county board. It's over, Petra. Whatever you and Callahan have been doing here, it stops now." They stared at each other across the desk, neither willing to back down. The silence stretched taut between them, broken only by the distant sound of dogs beginning to stir as dawn approached. Finally, Petra's shoulders slumped. Not in defeat. Something darker crossed her face. "You have no idea what you're starting," she said quietly. "No idea at all." But Wren did know. She knew exactly what she was fighting for, and she wasn't about to stop now. The proof was in her hands, and Buck's life wasn't the only thing at stake anymore. The whole corrupt system was about to be exposed. The old farmhouse stood alone against the darkening sky, its weathered boards and sagging porch telling stories of better days. Wren sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel as she stared at the home she'd once shared with her father. 5 years had passed since she'd last driven up this gravel road. Her phone buzzed, a text from Silas. "Buck's safe for now. Dr. Baines is watching him. Take your time." She drew in a deep breath, gathered the file containing Buck's records, and stepped out into the chilly evening air. The crunch of gravel under her feet seemed impossibly loud. Each step toward the porch felt heavier than the last. Before she could knock, the screen door creaked open. Ephraim Halstead filled the doorway, his broad shoulders slightly stooped now, his silver hair catching the porch light. His expression was unreadable as he looked down at his daughter. "Wren." His voice was rough, unused to speaking her name. "Dad?" She swallowed hard. "I need your help." He studied her face for a long moment, then stepped back, holding the door. "Come in." The kitchen was exactly as she remembered. The ancient copper kettle on the stove, the scarred wooden table where she'd done her homework, the wall calendar still showing rescue squad events. Only the empty chair where her mother used to sit marked the passage of time. Ephraim moved to the stove without speaking, filling the kettle. The familiar routine of making tea gave them both something to focus on, besides the weight of unspoken words between them. "You're still at the shelter?" he asked finally, setting 2 mugs on the table. Wren nodded, pulling out the file. "That's why I'm here. There's a dog. I think you might know him." She slid Buck's old FEMA photo across the table. Ephraim's hand froze halfway to his mug. His weathered face changed, softened with recognition. "Buck," he breathed. "Where did you find him?" "He's at Cedar Ridge. They're going to put him down tomorrow morning." Her voice cracked. "Dad, they're saying he bit someone, but the report's forged. He's still the same dog you knew. Yesterday when I went into his kennel." She described Buck's alert posture, the way he'd blocked her path and pawed toward the exit. Ephraim's eyes never left the photo as she spoke. His calloused fingers traced the outline of Buck's younger face. "That's his signal," he said quietly. "When he found someone in the rubble, that's how he'd tell us. Paw pointing the way, wouldn't let anyone pass until we understood." He looked up at her, and for the first time in years, she saw past the stern facade to the pain underneath. "Buck never bit anyone in his life. He was the gentlest search dog I ever trained, saved 16 lives in 3 years of service." "What happened to him? How did he end up at the shelter?" Ephraim's jaw tightened. "After I retired, they reassigned him to a new handler. Young guy didn't understand working dogs. Buck was getting older, slowing down. Instead of retiring him properly, they labeled him unsuitable for service and dumped him into the system. I tried to find him, but... He shook his head. By then your mother was sick. Everything fell apart. The unspoken grief filled the kitchen. Wren wrapped her hands around her cooling mug. I'm sorry I wasn't here more, she whispered. After Mom, I'm sorry too. Ephraim's voice was gruff with emotion. I shut down, pushed you away when we both needed... He cleared his throat. But Buck, tell me everything. For the next hour, Wren laid out the whole story. The suspicious euthanasia pattern, Callahan's influence, Petra's confession. Ephraim listened intently, asking sharp questions that showed his years of investigative experience hadn't faded. The shelter opens at 7 tomorrow, Wren finished. Petra will try to rush the procedure through before we can stop her. I don't know what to do, Dad. I can't let them kill him. Ephraim stood abruptly, disappearing into the living room. When he returned, he carried a dusty photo album. He opened it carefully, revealing page after page of Buck in his working days. Buck with his FEMA vest, Buck leading searches through disaster zones, Buck receiving his service medal. Look at this one, Ephraim said softly, pointing to a photo of Buck standing alert in front of a collapsed building. Oklahoma City, 2015. Buck found a little girl trapped under 3 floors of concrete. Everyone else had given up, said there couldn't be survivors in that section. But he wouldn't quit. Stood just like you described, pointing, refusing to move until we understood. He turned the page to a newspaper clipping. The headline read, FEMA K9 hero leads rescuers to survivor after 48 hours. The photo showed Buck being hugged by a tearful mother, while a small girl smiled from her hospital bed. That's who Buck is, Ephraim said firmly. A hero, and heroes deserve better than being put down because some bureaucrat wants prettier pictures for their donors. Wren felt tears pricking at her eyes. Will you help me save him? Ephraim closed the album gently. When he looked at her, she saw a spark of the fire that had made him legendary in the rescue service. I've got some calls to make. People who remember Buck, who won't be happy about this. And I've still got friends on the force who'd be very interested in those forged documents. He reached across the table and, hesitantly, covered her hand with his. The gesture was awkward but sincere. We'll save him, Wren. Together this time. She turned her hand over to squeeze his, and for a moment they were simply father and daughter again, united by love for a dog who had never forgotten his calling. I've got coffee in the pantry, Ephraim said, standing. Stronger than tea. We've got a long night ahead of us. As he moved around the kitchen, Wren noticed his steps were lighter, his shoulders straighter. She felt it too, a sense of purpose, of rightness. Whatever happened tomorrow, they wouldn't face it alone. The old farmhouse creaked around them as they began to plan, and somewhere in the darkness, a dog barked, a reminder of why they were here, why this mattered, why some battles were worth fighting together. Wren's heart pounded as she strode through the double doors of the Cedar Ridge County Administration Building. The morning sun cast long shadows through the plate glass windows, making the marble floors gleam like ice. Beside her, Silas Merrick and Dr. Lionel Baines kept pace, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Remember, Silas murmured, stay calm no matter what they say. We've got the evidence. Dr. Baines clutched his medical bag, knuckles white. I should have spoken up sooner. All those files. You're speaking up now, Wren said firmly. That's what matters. They reached the boardroom doors. Through the frosted glass, Wren could see dark shapes moving inside. Her father's words from last night echoed in her mind. Show them who you are. Show them what's right. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the doors. The shelter board members sat around a long mahogany table, their faces a mix of annoyance and curiosity. Petra Klein occupied her usual seat near the head, perfectly composed in her tailored suit. But Wren noticed her fingers drumming against her leather portfolio, a tell she'd observed whenever Petra felt threatened. At the head of the table sat Brody Callahan, Cedar Ridge's biggest donor and the shelter's most influential supporter. His smile was practiced, politician perfect, but his eyes were cold as he watched them enter. "Miss Halstead," he said smoothly, "this is a closed board meeting, and you're currently suspended from your duties." "I'm here as a concerned citizen," Wren replied, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "And I have evidence of serious misconduct at the shelter that the board needs to see." Petra's fingers stopped drumming. "Mr. Callahan, this is highly irregular. Miss Halstead has been causing disruptions." "Let her speak." The words came from Eleanor Matthews, the oldest board member. Her steel-gray hair and stern expression reminded Wren of her third-grade teacher. "If there are problems at the shelter, we should hear them." Wren pulled out her folder and began distributing copies of Buck's service record. "The dog scheduled for euthanasia tomorrow morning isn't just another stray. He's a decorated FEMA search and rescue canine with 16 confirmed saves. His name is Buck, and his euthanasia order is based on a forged bite report." Murmurs rippled through the room as the board members examined the documents. Wren continued, her voice growing stronger. "Dr. Baines has Buck's complete medical history, showing no aggressive incidents, and Officer Merrick has evidence that the bite report was falsified." Silas stepped forward, laying out his own documentation. "The signature on the bite report belongs to a temporary worker who left the shelter 3 months before the alleged incident. I've got sworn statements from other staff members confirming she wasn't present on the date in question." Dr. Baines cleared his throat nervously. "I've examined Buck multiple times. He shows no signs of aggression. In fact, his temperament assessment scores are consistently excellent." Brody Callahan leaned back in his chair, that practiced smile never wavering. "This all sounds like a simple procedural confusion. Paperwork gets mixed up sometimes. I'm sure Ms. Klein can explain—" "I can explain," Wren cut in, pulling out her phone, "because I have security footage from the shelter's own cameras." Petra's face went pale. Wren connected her phone to the room's projection system, and suddenly the wall filled with grainy but clear footage of the shelter's office area late at night. The timestamp showed 2 days ago. The board watched in silence as Petra entered the frame, moving quickly to the filing cabinet. She pulled out several folders and began feeding them into the shredder, page by page. The camera angle clearly showed Buck's file among them. "This isn't just about one dog," Wren said into the stunned silence. "Officer Merrick has documented a pattern. Older dogs, many with excellent temperaments and adoption potential, are being marked as dangerous and euthanized to make room for younger, more marketable animals, usually just before major donor events." Eleanor Matthews turned to Petra, her expression thunderous. "Is this true?" "You don't understand the pressures we're under," Petra snapped, her composure finally cracking. "The shelter needs funding. Donors want to see results, happy stories, cute puppies finding homes. They don't want to see old dogs taking up space month after month." "Those old dogs are living beings," Dr. Baines said, his quiet voice carrying unexpected authority. "And we took an oath to protect them, not dispose of them for better photo ops." Brody Callahan raised his hands, trying to regain control of the situation. "Let's not get emotional. Every shelter has to make hard choices. Perhaps we can review the procedures, implement some new oversight." "With all due respect, Mr. Callahan," Silas interrupted, "this isn't about procedures. This is about falsifying documents and killing innocent animals to manipulate donation statistics. That's criminal behavior. The board erupted in overlapping voices. Eleanor Matthews rapped her knuckles sharply on the table. Order! This is clearly a serious matter that requires immediate attention. She fixed Petra with a stern glare. All euthanasia orders are hereby suspended pending a full investigation. Ms. Klein, you will surrender your shelter keys and access codes to Officer Merrick immediately. You can't, Petra began. We can, and we will, another board member spoke up. This is completely unacceptable. Wren felt a wave of relief wash over her. She caught Silas's eye, and he gave her a slight nod. They'd done it. Buck would live, at least for now. But then Brody Callahan stood, straightening his expensive suit jacket. His smile had turned sharp around the edges. While I appreciate everyone's concern, I think we're moving too hastily. As the shelter's primary donor, I have some thoughts on how this situation should be handled. The room grew quiet. Wren felt her stomach tighten. They'd won this round, but something in Callahan's tone told her the real fight was just beginning. Eleanor Matthews squared her shoulders. The board will consider your input, Mr. Callahan, but our first duty is to the truth and the proper care of these animals. Of course, he replied smoothly. I'm simply suggesting we take time to review all the facts before making any rash decisions. Wren gathered her documents, keeping her expression neutral despite the worry gnawing at her gut. They'd achieved their immediate goal. Buck was safe for the moment. But as she caught Silas's concerned glance, she knew this was far from over. The board began discussing investigation procedures, their voices a distant buzz in Wren's ears. She watched Petra Klein hand her keys to Silas, the woman's face a mask of barely contained fury. And beyond her, Brody Callahan stood at the window, his reflection in the glass showing not anger, but calculation. The fluorescent lights of the shelter's parking lot cast long shadows as staff members filed out after the contentious board meeting. Petra Klein stood alone by her car, her manicured nails drumming against the steering wheel. Her normally pristine appearance showed signs of strain. Her blazer was wrinkled, and wisps of hair had escaped her usually perfect bun. Her phone buzzed. 2 words from Callahan lit up the screen. Finish it. Petra's hand trembled as she stared at the message. Everything she'd built was crumbling. 15 years of careful image management, of keeping the shelter's numbers exactly where they needed to be, of dancing to the tune of donors like Callahan, all of it threatened by one aging dog and a stubborn kennel worker. She took a deep breath, straightened her spine, and marched back into the shelter. The evening shift was just starting, and she still had enough authority to make things happen. One last time. Everyone clock out early tonight, she announced, her voice sharp and brooking no argument. We're doing inventory tomorrow, and I need the building clear. I'll handle the evening medications myself. A few staff members exchanged uncertain glances, but no one dared question her. Not yet. Not while she still wore the director's badge. In her office, Petra locked away the day's files and pulled out her personal set of keys. The ones she hadn't surrendered. The ones that would give her access to the medical cabinet where they kept the euthanasia drugs. Across town, at the worn but welcoming Sunrise Diner, Wren sat across from Silas in a red vinyl booth. The vintage jukebox played soft country music, and the smell of coffee and apple pie filled the air. For the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. I still can't believe we did it, she said, wrapping her hands around a steaming mug. When I saw Buck's red tag, I never thought... Silas smiled, his tired eyes crinkling at the corners. You did good, Wren. Real good. Standing up to Petra and Callahan like that, not many would have had the guts. I couldn't have done it without you and Dr. Baines, Wren replied. Speaking of which, we should order him some pie. He looked pretty shaken after standing up to the board like that. The doc's got more spine than people give him credit for, Silas agreed. He paused, studying her face. You know, when I first started at Cedar Ridge, I almost quit. Seeing how things were run, it ate at me, but I figured one person couldn't change anything. And now? Now I'm glad I stuck around to see you prove me wrong. A warm blush crept up Wren's neck, and she busied herself with her coffee. The comfortable moment was shattered by her phone's sudden ring. Dr. Baines's name flashed on the screen. Lionel, what's wrong? The tremor in his voice sent ice through her veins. They're doing it tonight, he wheezed, clearly struggling to catch his breath. I came back to get my laptop. Petra's here. She sent everyone home early. She's got the medical cabinet open, Wren. She's going to euthanize Buck off the books. Wren's coffee mug clattered against the table. What? She can't. The board suspended all euthanasias. Since when has that stopped her? Lionel's voice cracked. I'm hiding in my office. She doesn't know I'm here. But Wren, you need to hurry. She's setting everything up now. Silas was already on his feet, throwing money on the table. We're on our way. Doc, call Eleanor Matthews. Then call the police. This is illegal and we need it documented. Wren's hands shook as she grabbed her jacket. How could we be so stupid? Of course Callahan wouldn't let it go. This was his plan all along. Let us think we'd won, then finish it quietly. They raced to Silas's truck, the tires squealing as they pulled out of the parking lot. Rain had started to fall, making the streets slick and dark. Call your father, Silas said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He might be able to help. Buck was his unit's dog. That's got to count for something. Wren nodded, her fingers fumbling with the phone. After years of distance, she'd only just started rebuilding that bridge with her father. Now she needed him more than ever. Dad, it's Wren. We need help. Petra's going to kill Buck tonight, illegally. Can you make some calls? Maybe to your old FEMA contacts? Her father's response was immediate and firm. I'm already in my truck. I'll meet you there. And Wren, we're not losing him. Not like this. The windshield wipers beat a frantic rhythm as they sped toward the shelter. Wren's mind raced with images of Buck, his dignified bearing, his intelligent eyes, the way he'd tried to warn her that very first night. She couldn't let it end this way. Faster, she urged Silas. Please. He pressed the accelerator, running a yellow light. We'll make it, he promised, but they both knew that every second counted. In the veterinary world, once those drugs were administered, there was no going back. Through the rain-streaked windows, the shelter's lights glowed like accusing eyes in the darkness. Somewhere inside, a woman with a syringe was about to commit the ultimate betrayal of trust. And an old hero, who had saved so many lives, was about to lose his own. The truck's headlights cut through the rain as they pulled into the parking lot. Petra's car sat alone in her reserved space, a silent sentinel to her final act of desperation. The shelter loomed before them, its dark windows reflecting the storm's fury. Rain pelted the pavement in angry sheets as Wren and Silas sprinted from the truck. Their footsteps splashed through puddles, sending water flying as they raced to the main entrance. Wren yanked the handle. Locked! She pounded on the glass, her heart thundering. Through the window, she could make out the dim emergency lights casting eerie shadows in the lobby. Silas tried his keycard. The reader stayed dark. She's shut down the security system, he growled. We need another way in. Lightning flashed, illuminating the desperation on Wren's face. The side window, by the break room. It's got a broken latch. She was already moving, her shoes sliding on the wet concrete. Wren, wait! Silas caught up to her. Breaking in could get us arrested. I don't care! Her voice cracked with emotion. Buck's in there. He saved lives. He deserves better than being murdered in the dark. They reached the window. Silas shrugged off his jacket, wrapped it around his elbow, and met Wren's eyes. "You sure about this?" "Do it." The glass shattered with a crash that was mostly swallowed by a thunderclap. Silas cleared the sharp edges, then gave Wren a boost. She scrambled through, landing in a crouch on the break room floor. Silas followed, his larger frame barely fitting through the opening. The shelter felt wrong in the dim light. Familiar spaces turned alien and threatening. Their footsteps echoed as they crept down the corridor toward the medical wing. A whimper from somewhere in the kennels made Wren's chest tighten. They found Dr. Baines in the prep room, his face ashen under the emergency lights. He stood beside the steel exam table where Buck lay motionless. "He's sedated," Lionel whispered, his hands shaking. I tried to stall, gave him the minimum dose, but she has the..." His eyes darted to the door. "She has the pentobarbital ready." Wren rushed to Buck's side. The old dog's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. His eyes were half open but unfocused. She buried her fingers in his graying fur. "We're here, buddy. We're not letting this happen." How touching. They all spun toward the doorway. Petra stood there, a loaded syringe in her perfectly manicured hand. Her tailored suit looked out of place at this hour, like she'd dressed for a funeral. "You're breaking so many laws right now," she said, her voice eerily calm. "Breaking and entering, interfering with shelter operations, threatening a county employee." "We're threatening you?" Silas stepped forward. "You're the one about to illegally euthanize a service animal against board orders." Petra's smile was cold. "I have here an authorized euthanasia order for a dangerous animal, signed and dated. If some overzealous employees chose to interfere, well..." She shrugged. "That's hardly my fault." "It's a lie," Wren said, positioning herself between Petra and Buck. "Everything about this is a lie. The bite report, the timing, all of it. We have proof." "And you're throwing away your career for a dog." Petra took a step closer, the syringe gleaming. "All of you are. Dr. Baines, your license will be revoked for this. Officer Merrick, say goodbye to your pension. And you, Wren..." She clicked her tongue. So much potential. Wasted. Thunder boomed overhead. The emergency lights flickered, casting strange shadows across Petra's face. "You don't understand what it takes to run this place," Petra continued. "The compromises, the hard choices. Callahan's donations keep our doors open. Without him, we might actually help animals instead of killing them for convenience." Wren's voice rose above the storm. "Buck is a hero. He saved lives. And you're going to murder him because some rich donor wants prettier dogs for photo ops?" The lights flickered again, longer this time. In the momentary darkness, they heard movement in the hallway, footsteps approaching. "Step away from that dog." Petra's voice had lost its smoothness. "This ends now." "You're right about that." The power chose that moment to fail completely. In the pitch blackness, chaos erupted. Someone knocked into the exam table. Metal instruments clattered to the floor. Wren felt Buck stir beneath her protective hands. A flash of lightning illuminated the room like a strobe light. Petra lunging forward, Silas moving to intercept, the syringe arcing through the air. Then darkness again, filled with the sounds of struggle. Thunder crashed. Emergency lights sputtered back to life. Wren found herself on the floor beside Buck, who was trying to raise his head despite the sedation. Silas had Petra pinned against the wall, the syringe secured in his grip. Dr. Baines stood frozen, wide-eyed, as new figures appeared in the doorway. "Police! Nobody move!" The beam of a flashlight swept the room, followed by the commanding voice of Eleanor Matthews, the shelter board president. What in God's name is going on here? Behind her stood Wren's father, Ephraim Halstead, his face like thunder. 2 police officers flanked them, taking in the broken window, the scattered medical supplies, and the tableau of struggle before them. Petra's mask finally cracked. "This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "I was just following procedure." "Procedure?" Eleanor's voice could have cut steel. "I suspended all euthanasia orders 3 hours ago. Care to explain why you're here after hours with a loaded syringe?" One of the officers moved to secure Petra, while his partner began taking photos of the scene. Wren stayed by Buck's side, her hand on his chest, feeling each precious heartbeat. The storm raged on outside, but inside the prep room, a different kind of thunder was breaking. Petra's carefully constructed world of compromise and corruption was crumbling, exposed by the very darkness she'd tried to use as cover. Buck's tail thumped weakly against the table. Even sedated, even in danger, the old hero was still fighting, still protecting, still refusing to go quietly into that dark night. The chaos in the prep room suddenly shifted as an acrid smell cut through the tension. At first, it was faint, just a hint of something burning beneath the antiseptic shelter scents. But Buck's head lifted sharply from the exam table, his nostrils flaring despite the sedation. "Something's wrong," Wren said, watching the old dog's reaction. His cloudy eyes had gained a new focus, tracking something none of them could sense yet. Officer Matthews was still securing Petra when Buck let out a low growl. It wasn't aggressive. Wren had learned to read his signals over the past months. This was different. His muscles trembled as he fought against the sedatives, trying to rise. "He shouldn't be able to move yet," Dr. Baines said, stepping closer. "The dose I gave him." Buck's bark cut through the room like a thunderclap. Sharp, rhythmic. 3 distinct barks, then a pause. 3 more. A pattern Wren had never heard from him before. Her father's face changed. "That's a search alert," Ephraim said, moving towards the dog. "I'd know it anywhere. He's picking up on something." The smell was stronger now. Smoke. Definitely smoke, and it was getting thicker. Buck barked again, the same urgent pattern, his eyes fixed on the hallway leading to the shelter's back offices. "Fire," Eleanor Matthews said, already reaching for her phone. "Everyone out now. I'm calling 911. But Buck wasn't heading toward the exit. Despite his wobbly legs, he lurched off the exam table, nearly falling. Wren caught him, trying to support his weight. He shrugged her off, stumbling toward the back hallway with single-minded determination. "Buck, we need to go." Wren tried to guide him toward the door, but he resisted, barking that same alert pattern. His eyes met hers with an intensity that stopped her cold. She'd seen that look before, the night she found his red tag. The look that said he knew exactly what needed to be done. "The laundry room's back there," Silas said, coughing as smoke began filling the corridor. "And Petra's office?" Petra's head snapped up, her face draining of color. "Tamsin?" she whispered. "What?" Wren spun toward her. "Callahan's daughter," Petra said, her composure cracking completely. "She was tired during their meeting. I let her nap on my office couch while her father handled some shelter business. She's still, oh God." Buck barked again, more urgently, already moving down the smoke-filled hallway. Without hesitation, Wren followed him. "Wren, no!" She heard her father shout behind her, but Buck was already turning the corner, and she wasn't about to let him face this alone. The smoke got thicker with every step. She pulled her shirt over her nose, squinting through the haze. The heat was intense, radiating from the laundry room door. Through the window, she could see flames dancing across piles of blankets and towels, climbing the walls. Buck ignored the laundry room entirely, focused on Petra's office door just beyond it. The handle was hot when Wren touched it. locked. "Tamsin!" she shouted, pounding on the door. "Tamsin, are you in there?" A small, frightened voice answered. "Help! I can't get out." The smoke was so thick now that Wren could barely see. Her eyes burned, her lungs screamed for clean air, but Buck was still there, still alert, still refusing to retreat without completing his mission. "Stand back from the door!" Wren shouted. She took 2 steps back, then kicked as hard as she could, right beside the handle. The door shuddered but held. She kicked again, and again. On the 4th try, the frame splintered and the door burst inward. Smoke poured into the office. Through the haze, Wren saw a small figure huddled in the corner, blonde curls covered in soot. Tamsin Callahan looked up with terrified eyes, clutching a stuffed animal to her chest. "Come on!" Wren reached for her, but the girl shrank back, overwhelmed and scared. That's when Buck pushed past Wren, moving with the steady purpose that had marked his entire career as a rescue dog. He approached Tamsin slowly, tail wagging, and pressed his graying muzzle against her hand. The girl's eyes widened with recognition. She'd seen him in the kennels during her visits with her father. Buck gently took her sleeve in his teeth, tugging her towards the door. "That's right," Wren encouraged, reaching for Tamsin's other hand. "He's here to help. We both are. But we have to go now." The fire had spread to the ceiling tiles. Burning debris was falling around them. The heat was becoming unbearable. But Buck kept his grip on Tamsin's sleeve, and the girl finally stood, clutching Wren's hand. They made their way into the corridor. The laundry room was fully engulfed now, flames licking out into the hallway. Their exit route was cut off. "This way." Wren pulled Tamsin toward the back emergency exit, grateful for all those mandatory fire drills. Buck stayed close to the girl's other side, his body pressed against her legs, guiding her through the thickening smoke. Wren's lungs burned. She could hear Tamsin coughing beside her. Even Buck's steps were becoming unsteady again as the sedatives and smoke took their toll, but none of them stopped moving. They reached the emergency exit. Wren slammed the push bar with her shoulder, and cool night air rushed in. They stumbled out into the rain just as the first fire trucks arrived, sirens wailing. "Tamsin!" A man's voice cut through the chaos. Brody Callahan pushed through the gathering crowd, his expensive suit soaked, his face ashen. "Oh God, Tamsin!" The girl ran to her father's arms. Wren sagged against the wall, coughing hard. She felt Buck lean heavily against her legs, his mission finally complete. Paramedics swarmed around them. Someone wrapped a blanket over Wren's shoulders. Through the haze of smoke and rain, she saw her father pushing through the crowd, his face a mixture of terror and pride. But it was Buck who held her attention. Despite his exhaustion, despite the sedatives still in his system, his tail wagged slowly as he watched Tamsin being checked by the medical team. Sanjamite's eyes were clear and bright, filled with the same unwavering purpose that had guided him through countless rescues. He wasn't just an old dog waiting to die. He was, and always had been, a hero, and he had just proved it to everyone who had doubted him. The flames rose higher behind them as firefighters battled the blaze, but Wren kept her hand buried in Buck's fur, feeling his steady heartbeat. They were both covered in soot, both struggling to breathe properly, but they were alive. And more importantly, so was the little girl they'd saved. Thick smoke filled Wren's lungs as she crawled forward on her hands and knees. The office carpet burned hot beneath her palms, but she kept moving. Buck stayed close beside her, his graying muzzle nearly touching the floor as he guided them through the blinding haze. "We need to get to the window," Wren choked out between coughs. The main door was blocked by fallen debris, leaving only one way out. Through the dense smoke, She could make out the faint outline of Petra's office window. Tamsin huddled against Buck's other side, her small body shaking with each ragged breath. The girl's blonde curls were dark with soot, and tears had cut clean tracks through the grime on her face. "Just a little further," Wren encouraged, though her own voice was rough from smoke. The heat pressed down on them like a physical weight. Above their heads, the ceiling groaned ominously. Buck suddenly barked, two sharp, urgent sounds. Wren looked up to see flames licking along the ceiling tiles directly above them. "Move!" she screamed, shoving Tamsin forward just as a burning chunk of material crashed down behind them. They reached the window. Through the smoky glass, Wren could see Silas's face, illuminated by the emergency lights and growing flames. He was shouting something she couldn't hear over the roar of the fire. Wren grabbed a metal trash can from beside Petra's desk and hurled it at the window with all her strength. The glass shattered outward in a shower of glittering shards. Cool night air rushed in, bringing brief relief from the suffocating heat. "Silas!" she screamed. "Catch her!" Silas braced himself below the window, arms outstretched. Wren lifted Tamsin, who was surprisingly light in her adrenaline-fueled state. "Hold your breath and close your eyes," she instructed the terrified girl. Then she pushed her through the window into Silas's waiting arms. The sound of splintering wood filled the air. Wren looked up to see cracks spreading across what remained of the ceiling. Flames danced in the gaps, hungry and fierce. "Wren!" A familiar voice cut through the chaos. Her father, Ephraim, was there now too, dragging a fire hose from his truck. The sight of him in his old firefighting gear, moving with practiced urgency, brought tears to her smoke-strained eyes. Ephraim aimed the hose at the window, clearing away the worst of the flames. "Now, both of you!" Buck was weakening, the earlier sedatives and smoke taking their toll. Wren wrapped her arms around his chest and heaved him toward the window. Despite his size, the old dog understood what she was doing and managed to scramble partly through the opening. Strong hands grabbed Buck from the other side, Silas and Ephraim working together to pull him to safety. Wren started to follow, but a thunderous crack above made her look up. The ceiling was giving way. "Jump!" her father bellowed. "Now!" Wren launched herself through the window just as the roof collapsed. Heat seared her back, and something sharp caught her leg. But then she was falling through cool air. Multiple hands caught her, breaking her fall. She rolled onto wet grass, gasping in great lungfuls of clean air. Buck was there immediately, pressing against her side despite his own exhaustion. Through watering eyes, she watched as the building's roof caved in completely, sending a fountain of sparks into the night sky. Ephraim knelt beside her, his weathered face streaked with soot and worry. "You okay, kid?" The gruffness in his voice couldn't hide his concern. Wren managed a nod, still fighting to catch her breath. She reached out and caught her father's hand, squeezing it tightly. With her other hand, she held onto Buck's collar, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, proof that they had both made it out alive. Nearby, she could hear Tamsin coughing, but alive, being tended to by paramedics. The girl was safe. They were all safe. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, and she sagged against her father's shoulder, letting the adrenaline drain away as fire trucks wailed in the distance. Dawn broke over the smoking ruins of Cedar Ridge County Shelter. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray sky like metal flowers. Camera crews jostled for position, while reporters in bright jackets delivered their morning broadcasts. Wren stood off to the side, watching as firefighters sifted through the debris. Her father's testimony about Buck's service record played on every channel, alongside security footage showing Petra shredding documents and falsifying bite reports. The truth had finally broken through. Police led Petra Klein out of her home in handcuffs, her tailored suit replaced by a disheveled blouse and wrinkled slacks. The cameras swiveled to capture her downfall. Behind her, detectives carried boxes of evidence, years of fraudulent paperwork that detailed exactly how many innocent animals had died to maintain the shelter's perfect image. Brody Callahan's empire didn't survive the day. His daughter's near-death experience, combined with proof of his pressure on Petra to clean house, triggered a massive investigation into his business practices. His company's stock plummeted as shareholders fled. The county board acted swiftly. They reinstated Wren with a formal apology and promoted Silas to acting shelter director. But Wren had no interest in press conferences or television interviews. Instead, she sat beside Buck's recovery kennel at the veterinary hospital, her hand resting on his graying muzzle. "You did it, old man," she whispered as Buck dozed peacefully, an IV drip helping flush the sedatives from his system. "You showed them all what a real hero looks like." The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees as Buck made his way down the veterinary clinic's front steps. His gait was still careful, but his tail wagged with unmistakable joy. The old dog's eyes, though clouded with age, sparkled with renewed life as he looked up at Wren. Ephraim stood a few feet away, his weathered hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He watched as Wren knelt beside Buck, carefully adjusting the new leather collar around his neck. The adoption papers crinkled in her back pocket, official proof that Buck was finally, truly hers. "You know," Ephraim's voice was rough with emotion, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I've been thinking about all those years we barely spoke." Wren's hands stilled on Buck's fur. "Dad." "No, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "You never stopped fighting for what was right, even when I couldn't see it, even when I was too stubborn to understand why you left the fire service." His eyes met hers, full of pride. "You're so much like your mother that way." Tears pricked at Wren's eyes as she stood. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the family disappointment. She saw herself reflected in her father's gaze, not as a failure, but as his daughter, strong and principled in her own right. Buck pressed against her leg, his solid presence grounding her in the moment. Together, they made an unlikely family, a retired firefighter, his determined daughter, and an old rescue dog who had brought them back together. The crisp morning air carried the excited chatter of children gathered at the local park. 3 months had passed since Buck's adoption, and today marked a special occasion. Wren and Ephraim had organized a search and rescue demonstration to inspire the next generation. Buck moved slowly but purposefully through the training course they'd set up. His graying muzzle held high, he followed the scent trail to a hidden target, giving his signature alert bark, sharp, clear, and confident. The children gasped and clapped, their eyes wide with wonder. Silas, standing at Wren's side, squeezed her hand gently as the fire chief stepped forward. A small medal gleamed in his hands, a special commendation for Buck's years of service and his final heroic act at the shelter. "For extraordinary courage and dedication," the chief announced, carefully draping the medal around Buck's neck. The old dog sat perfectly still, as if understanding the honor being bestowed upon him. Wren knelt beside Buck, her fingers threading through his fur. He leaned into her leg, his eyes closing peacefully as applause filled the air. In that moment, she saw their whole journey reflected. From that dark night with the red tag to this bright morning of celebration. Buck's story had transformed from one of betrayal to one of triumph, proving that courage and compassion could overcome even the darkest lies. Ephraim beamed with pride at his daughter and the dog who had brought their family back together. Silas's quiet smile spoke volumes as he watched Wren and Buck bask in the moment they'd fought so hard to reach. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.